Hi, I've just been watched this video, Noam Chomsky, 9/11 Gatekeeper and Intellectual Coward. I know he spelt intellectual wrong in the title, but it's spelt correctly down below. Perhaps that's an irony, that a lot of people would read that and say, yeah, ooze, you can't even spell intellectual. You know, those are the kind of things that people cling to in order to ignore. You know, they'll focus on a little speck of something wrong in order to ignore the whole truth, you know, something slightly out of place in the way somebody's shared the truth. So they'll focus on that rather than the actual truth that the person is sharing. It's one of the ironies of this world. Strain at a gnat, swallow a camel society. I mean, what he's saying, he is correct. He is an intellectual gatekeeper, and it's true, our universities are full of them. Okay. Now, this guy who's, like, presented this, Alfred, he's, well, basically, he wrote a letter to Noam Chomsky, challenging him on his present stance about 9/11, and him saying, you know, like, really refusing to discuss it, and saying, no, until these engineers put an official report together and publish it in an official paper, then we can't debate it. But we know damn well that none of the architects and engineers who have written papers explaining thoroughly the physics, you know, that cannot be denied, and but there are no academic papers or whatever that is going to publish it. You know, they're just not going to do it, because the intelligentsia of America, so-called, don't want to accept the truth, because then they'd have to blatantly ignore it, wouldn't they, in order to sustain their cosy little lives in this very miserable and uncosy world that the majority have to live in, and that those who sail above everything can just, well, basically just relish in their own position and, you know, feed their ego to justify being where they are, and you know, they enjoy the attention. So, you know, I mean, I'll put a comment here. Chumpsky, you can't understand the laws of physics. At least you got a reply. He did not bother to reply to my email asking him for support toward addressing the Oxford English Dictionary's misinterpretation of the words ignorance and ignorant, i.e. as meaning not knowing. I explained that it is a linguistic corruption to interpret a word by ignoring the root foundation of the word, i.e. ignore equals to know and take no notice of. Ignorance is a choice, it is not a condition of being mystified. Of course, we know why they misinterpreted it. The ignorant are heathen under God's law, and therefore have no human rights. The misinterpretation gave them lawful grounds, so-called, for judging and enslaving native peoples. So, Chumpsky's ignorant about his own field of knowledge as well. The letter I wrote to Oxford University Head of Linguistics is published in my Facebook notes. It was ignored. Okay. And I can't even share the link because Facebook will only show it like this, so I can't get an individual link for it. But this was my letter. You know. How is it possible for someone to ignore what they do not or even cannot know? Can they truly be judged ignorant in the eyes of both God and the law? In reality, that is what the present misinterpretation of the word ignorant appears to be all about, condemning the global social mass as ignorant, no defence in law, guilty of not knowing, heathen, in the eyes of God, no rights under God's law. This misapplication of ignorance onto Africans, Native Americans, Native Australians, in fact, against almost every people on earth, is what has given the established orders a right to implement illegal laws and to truly ignore the common law and thereby rob the people of their wealth and universal human rights. It is against our human rights to suffer the present Oxford English interpretation of the word ignorant, because it means every person with no knowledge and or no formal education is condemned as ignorant, which is an unfair judgment. It is inhumane. It does not take into account the fact that people cannot be held responsible for not knowing about their things they have neither opportunity or ability to know, and even are regularly actively prevented from knowing by socio-economics, political secrets. In such circumstances, people are not ignorant, they are simply mystified. When people do not know something about a subject, or even their own human rights, it is the responsibility of those who know to share their knowledge and put it to use on behalf of the mystified. It is our human right and duty to end mystification. Equals why knowledge based on evidence and facts is important. Because intelligent beings, to be intelligent, need to operate on a solid foundation of truth, equals reality. According to present Oxford English Dictionary interpretations, any ruling power may easily condemn the global population as largely living in ignorance, i.e. the ignorant mass. Except whose ignorance are we living in? In reality, the global mass is suffering the ignorance of their rulers, i.e. ignorance of human rights, ignorance of common law, ignorance of new knowledge that fundamentally questions the legalities supporting existing power structures. Oxford English Dictionary's interpretation needs to be interpreted correctly, equals ignorant, a person who ignores the procedures, see ignore, a person who knows but refuses to utilise or honour their knowledge, the New World Order. I sincerely hope you will look into this important issue and accept that lack of knowledge equals mystified, not ignorance, and that you accept that misinterpretation of the word ignorant as meaning not knowing has inflicted untold damage and suffering to all the life on our planet by the rights those in the know have given themselves on the proceeds of mass confusion. It's time for the confusion to end. Now, I wrote that. I did publish this the same day that I'd sent it to the head of linguistics at Oxford University, and I didn't even get a reply, But so after that, I did write to Noam Chomsky, Chumpsky, as I now call it. And I shared him a copy of this letter, and I asked for his support because he is a professor of linguistics, you see. So I thought, well, he's surely going to support this because it's true. That is how they have condemned all the native peoples, that, just by misinterpreting one word. That's how powerful words are. Words are really powerful. We don't even know ourselves the power of words, how they shape our minds. Because, that's why words are spelt, spelling. That's where the word spell comes from. The idea that somebody can cast a spell on you. They cast a spell on you with the words that they say. Okay, so when somebody interprets a word, you hear a word, you don't know what it means, somebody explains to you what that word means, you are now under the spell of your understanding of what that word means, except it's not your understanding, it's an understanding that the most powerful bodies on earth are upholding, and they are requesting you to uphold that same understanding. Okay, so the word ignorant and ignorance, the root of those words is ignore. Okay, so to ignore something means to know, and then to make a decision, to make a choice, not to act on what you know. You ignore the rules. You ignore the law. You ignore people's rights. You are ignorant, acting in ignorance. That's what. So what's that? Basically a criminal. And that's why there's no defence for the criminal to say, well, I just chose my right to ignore the law. It's like, well, I'm sorry, you haven't got a right to ignore the law. And if you're a person who's prepared to ignore the law, you're a threat to the whole of society, because you're ignorant. So perhaps we need to remove you out of society for a bit and, you know, educate you a bit so that you're no longer ignorant. Otherwise, sorry, you are a risk. You seem to be unable to comprehend that, you know, people have rights, that it's actually a benefit to live lawfully. We live lawfully for the benefit of life, our own lives and the life of the whole of our planet. That's why we live lawfully. You think you can go around living unlawfully? You think you can give yourself a right to live outside of universal law? That you can go abusing people and making slaves of people? You're an ignorant person, you're a heathen. You have no rights to freedom in a human society. That's what ignorance and ignorant is about. That's why they're condemned as heathen. Because they ignore, they know, but they ignore what they know. They choose to ignore what they know. You see. And so it is a very, very serious matter when you get the people who are ignorant, the criminals of history, getting together to misinterpret a word, apply it to the world at large, and then profit off that misinterpretation for centuries and centuries, and have everybody born under that spell, under the spell of that word. Ignorance. Ignorant. So that everybody who hears it knows, oh, it's because you're uneducated, it's because you don't know anything. You aren't you know, you are an inferior person because you don't know anything. You're not properly educated, you're not academically educated, so you're part of the ignorant mass. You don't know all the secrets, you don't know all the knowledge. You're part of the ignorant mass. No. If you don't know something, that's because the leaders of your society have made sure that you don't know it, or haven't given you the opportunity to learn and know. Because they keep the people mystified. But a mystified people are not an ignorant people. They're a hungry people who need to know. Because they're living on fictions and fantasies, aren't they? Because, you know, we're living on the proceeds. That is the absolute truth of it. We're living on the proceeds of the world's cornerstone. Because remember, the world ignored compassion for their cornerstone, which is what the human cornerstone for the human world, right? Oh no, leave that one behind. Their cornerstone is ignorance. That is their cornerstone. And all the powers that they've given themselves to enslave native peoples is all on the misinterpretation of the words ignorance and ignorant. And it is a corruption, and it is a purposeful thing, you know. And it is a spell. They captured people under that spell so that when anybody saw native peoples, they saw heathen. They're heathen. Oh, has that man got a chain round his neck, mummy? Oh, he's a heathen, love. He's one of the heathen. You know, the more like savages. They're not civilised like us. So that is, you know, so then that child's growing up under that same word spell, the same spell, the spell on the human consciousness. And it is a spell. And so, and it is again ironic, you know, I've mentioned it in other videos about witches and how they said, you know, all the things that witches could do: destroy crops, withdraw all your properties and holdings from a distance, destroy human fertility, rain down fire and pestilence and disease from above, you know, on their flying broomsticks. They could control the weather, you know, destroy people's crops. All of these things that witches could do, you know. They could cast spells on you, say a few words and something horrible will happen to you with the things, the words that come out of their mouth, the spell. Well, maybe the spell of intelligent men and women who grow up in our communities and who are there to guide the community that nature provides, the natural intelligence that's there for the people, not as a vain glorification of itself. Okay. Maybe the established powers who themselves had decided they were going to be the leaders, even though they've actually got no right to be leader because they're just stupid, and what they do is misguide and mislead, and they can't even lead themselves, and they're just constantly fighting and, you know, all scrappling about for power because they're living under the word spell. They're living under a word spell that was itself formulated and conceived within humans who've been raised in the consciousness of a wolf pack. And we're still living it out today because of the bloody powers that they're still all fighting for. And as I say, the heathen ignore. They choose to ignore by choice. They ignored the rules of linguistics, that you cannot fundamentally corrupt the meaning of the original word that the other words are founded on. You cannot corrupt the word ignore once it is placed in ignorance and ignorance. And it is outrageous, and it's such a very little thing that nobody really is taking it seriously. And I was disgusted because I thought, you know, Noam Chomsky, or Chumpsky is now, I have to call him, because he ignored my letter as well. He ignored my email. And that did annoy me, from a professor of linguistics who claims to be you know, aware of what's going on in the world and the established orders, and what was his book, Manufacturing Consent. Well, isn't this the prime foundation of manufacturing consent, by misinterpreting words, by abusing knowledge, by, you know, linguistic corruptions, and then applying it so that there's a spell around it. Because it, you know, one thing that intelligence, as far as I'm aware, that's reflected in the historical texts of our human consciousness within, you know, the holy books, it always reveals that true intelligence is about accepting the truth, accepting reality, and that the people who are intelligent have know something, because we're all intelligent, but we all know different things. So we all share what we know and discuss it, and then some things are accepted as fact because the evidence supports them, and so then the words we use are correct, they're understood to support a fact, to explain a fact, and to support that fact. And there's a natural elegance there that cannot be contrived by misinterpreting a few words here and there, because that's when all the elegance disappears, doesn't it? Once you start misinterpreting the words that you are basing as the foundation for your actions on. So the foundations of enslaving the native peoples of Africa was an understanding, an acceptance of a misinterpretation of a word. So that meant that the very intelligentsia that were accepting that misinterpretation were themselves acting in ignorance of the basic understanding of what linguistics is all about. And that is a very serious thing for a so-called ruling academia to ignore. And it does need putting right. And the establishment does need, the established intelligentsia do need to stand up and ask questions about this, because this is a very, very serious thing. And the people who were judged ignorant are to this very day still suffering under that judgment. And it is an annoyance, more than annoyance actually, to be, you know, witnessing people like him, who calls himself a professor of linguistics, claims to be speaking out against, you know, what? The Empire State. And it's like, but he can't support, he can't champion this concern now about the word ignorance and ignorance, and they can't accept that that was a spell on human consciousness that caused human consciousness to live a lie, to act on the strength of false judgments supported by their so-called intelligentsia elites, who are actually all ignorant by their very interpretation of the words ignorance and ignorant. So therefore they are heathen, and if they want to stop being heathen, then they better stop being ignorant and living in ignorance, and stop ignoring the crimes of history that they are responsible for, that have earned the wealth of this world and all the powers of this world, and that this world now owes to the life of this planet, and has a responsibility and a duty, a lawful duty. And if that carries on being ignored, then expect everything to be destroyed, because that consciousness, an ignorant consciousness within universal intelligence, is going to destroy itself. It is a program for self-destruction. So it's a very serious issue. But we live in a world that strains at a gnat while it swallows a camel. You know, instead, let's not think about anything at all. You know, let's focus on spelling mistakes. And this is what I mean about the spell, okay? Because what they were scared of is what the intelligent people were telling their communities, who quickly understand and guide their people. So this witch thing, it was all about stamping out the natural human guides, our human intelligence, and instead to impose their own ignorant intelligence, okay? And ultimately, for how many centuries, what powers do they have now? They have the powers to do everything that they said witches could do. And in fact, they've got the power to destroy the whole planet. They have got the power to destroy, rain down fire and pestilence and disease on earth from above. They have got power to remove your holdings and possessions from a distance. They have got power to take away your fertility. They have got power to control the weather. And how have they done it? With their word spells. With their word spells. And because the people were mystified, what could they say? Oh, I don't know. I'm ignorant, Your Honour. I don't know anything. Yes, well, that's no defence under the law. You're guilty, chump. So, you know, and we do need to end the ignorance, because we are living in it now. You know, the ignorance has become an actual reality, because they do have to ignore now even the laws of physics. I mean, apparently, according to Chumpsky, the architects and engineers of, you know, 9/11 that are asking questions about it, they're supposed to get an academic paper together, you know, like I say, who is going to publish it, even if they do. But they have done. But at the end of the day, what they're saying, it's just common sense, isn't it? Everybody with a modicum of common sense on the day when they saw the plane just melt into the building. You know, as I saw it, I was like, my eyes are seeing it, but my brain is telling me that that cannot happen. And my brain was correct. Because it cannot happen that an aluminium plane can just melt into a steel frame building. Sorry. But it happened, apparently. You know, but then when obviously the way the buildings came down, I mean, come on, it's just crazy. It really is, you know. But, you know, and this is what I mean about, that's how wide things get once you start living. You start founding your whole society and worlds for centuries and centuries on misinterpretations of the word, of the words, or replacing and altering words. You know, like Isaiah said, Jah said, give justice to the fatherless child. So, you know, it was changed to give judgment to the fatherless child. There's a big difference between judgment and justice, isn't there? So the fatherless child gets judged illegitimate. Whereas justice to a fatherless child is to make sure that that child benefits in their society to the same degree as if they had a father. That's justice for a fatherless child. To make sure they're not left behind, that, you know, they're included. To make it extra think that, yeah, I'm going to be your daddy for today, and come with my kids, we're going to take you all out. To include, give justice to the fatherless child. So, it is a very serious thing, and it is disturbing. It is very, very, very disturbing. Like I say, he could not get back in touch with me. At least he responded to him, but he did not get back in touch with me at all. Just totally ignored. And so did the head of Linguistics at Oxford University. It's like, oh, you're just mad. Oh, I can just ignore you. You've not got a master's degree or a doctorate. Because they're snobs. They're intellectual snobs. And they shy away from any true intelligence, you know. Because nobody can be educated really in this world and not be, at some point, make that choice to be complicit in the ignorance. And to cling on to, you know, the cognitive dissonance, so-called facts that help you stay in your cognitive dissonance. Oh, well, there's nothing I can do about that, you know. So, it is time that we stop to live in ignorance. It is time that the professional and people and the academics of this world started speaking out. Because you are gatekeepers. You are gatekeepers to the overall consciousness, and by your continued ignorance you are supporting a thoroughly unlawful, illegal system, and you are leading humanity to ruin.